Epic Fury operation. More than 50 Iranian warships were destroyed by us. Their coastal radar chains were destroyed by us. We simultaneously brought down their air defense network from 2 oceans. Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb are 2 choke points around the Islamic Republic that are occupied by 2 carrier strike groups. As we speak, a third is traveling over the Atlantic. The naval siege is the tightest since the Second World War, and it continues to get tighter. Nevertheless, the U.S. Navy has failed to do one thing. Not a single oil ship has been escorted by us over the Strait of Hormuz. Take a moment to sit with that. The greatest naval force in human history. 300 warships, 11 carrier strike groups, Tomahawk cruise missiles, the EEG's combat system, and 5th-generation stealth planes. Additionally, we won't send a convoy across a 21 nautical mile wide river. Currently, almost 100 supertankers are anchored outside the strait. Crews are waiting, engines are cold. Brent crude's price has increased from $70 per barrel to more than $100. The cost of war risk insurance is $250,000 per journey. The Navy, which recently destroyed the Iranian military, is sitting in open ocean as the world economy is collapsing. Why not? Because we don't have enough weapons. Not because we don't want to. Due to the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is not a strength test. It's a math test. And the math makes it quite evident that you should stay out. Become a drone frontline subscriber. Because those who serve should have an audience that is aware of the purpose. In the comments type, proud. You must first comprehend the map and the trap that was constructed within it in order to comprehend the math. Open the map. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is 21 nautical miles. That sounds expansive. It isn't, as 21 nautical miles are not used in commercial ships. The traffic separation method is used in commercial shipping. A buffer zone of 2 nautical miles separates the 2 designated lanes, each of which is 2 nautical miles wide. There are a total of 6 nautical miles of usable route. Put a ship in that hallway now. The supertanker, a massive crude carrier, is more than 1,100 feet long from bow to stern. 200-foot beam. 72 feet below the waterline is the draft. You're not navigating a ship over a sea. A building is being threaded through a corridor. Additionally, there are walls on both sides of the passageway. Iran owns one of them. 20% of the world's crude oil is transported through this corridor. 20 million barrels every day. Additionally, it transports a third of the world's fertilizer commerce and around 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. You're not simply upsetting an oil market if you block this hallway. You interfere with the supply networks that sustain society. Hormuz is not a choke point for oil. A choke point for civilization is Hormuz, and it's closed at the moment. Outside the strait, more than 100 tankers are anchored. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps declared the closure and vowed to confront any ship attempting to pass through. The price of Brent crude has risen above $100 per barrel. The cost of war risk insurance has skyrocketed to $250,000 per trip. Expenses are so high that the majority of shipping companies have given up. A chain across the water does not obstruct the passage. Math is preventing it. The math of danger is greater than the math of profit. Commerce comes to an end. The obvious question is, should we simply destroy the Iranian Navy? We have Tomahawk missiles, EEG destroyers, and carrier air wings. How about just escorting the tanks through? Because the individuals posing the question have not thoroughly examined the enemy or the map. This is what most analysts don't realize. Iran did not construct its defense at random. They examined every American naval action in these waters for 40 years. The Fifth Fleet has been stationed in Bahrain for decades, including Operation Earnest Will in 1987, Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, and Operation Prosperity Guardian last year. They observed, learnt, and reverse-engineered a multi-layered defense intended to take advantage of this strait's geometry, the one variable we are powerless to alter. The water is restricted. The passage is small, and Iran used every geographical drawback as a weapon. There are 3 layers to the trap. Each one takes advantage of a distinct dimension, and when combined, they produce an issue that cannot be solved by brute force. The majority of that architecture has been destroyed by 10 days of continuous air and naval attacks. More than 50 Iranian warships were destroyed or rendered useless in battle. 200 air defense systems went dark, and about 300 missile launchers were destroyed. The surface fleet is no longer a unified fighting force. Nevertheless, the strait remains blocked. Because what matters is how much survived, not how much we destroyed. The solution is severe in the mathematics of Escort, where a single weapon striking a single tanker eliminates all prior victories. 90% devastation is insufficient. 100% assurance is necessary for Escort, and this equation breaks between 90 and 100. Take a look at what remains. Since the damage has already been done, air power cannot repair this layer. Before the first bombs were dropped, Iran started planting mines. Dozens are already in the sea, according to US intelligence. The maritime channels are dotted with contact mines, moored mines, and bottom influence mines. Iran is thought to have between 2,000 and 6,000 weapons. We attacked storage facilities and destroyed 16 mine-laying vessels. As a result, the number of new mines entering the sea decreased. The mines that were already there were not removed. A mine cannot be bombed from the water. It must be located in murky water, propelled by currents across 360 square nautical miles of seafloor, classified and neutralized one at a time. Nearly all of the Avenger-class mine countermeasures fleet has been retired. There are still 4 ships, 4 of which were stationed 4,000 nautical miles away in Japan. According to experts, it might take many months to completely empty the strait. Recall the 1988 math. During Operation Earnest Will, the USS Samuel B. Roberts hit 1 Iranian contact mine. $1,500 was the mine's cost. It shattered the keel, blew an automobile-sized hole in the hull, and filled 2 compartments with 2,000 tons of seawater. $89.5 million was spent on repairs. A warship was almost sunk by a weapon that was less expensive than a used motorcycle. Imagine that mine beneath a supertanker that is transporting 2 million barrels of crude oil. The math becomes more difficult. The floor is held in place by mines, and firepower is insufficient to clear it. Layer 1 is that. Look up now. About 90% of Iran's missile launch capability was destroyed by us. Thano 300 launchers were removed. That is a remarkable accomplishment. The kind of campaign of repression that would put an end to most traditional conflicts. Hormuz, however, is not a traditional dispute. It's a hallway. 1 surviving launcher is sufficient in a hallway. The Zagros mountain range descends into the sea along Iran's coastline along the strait. Valleys, caves, tunnels, and ridgelines. The IRGC pre-positioned mobile transporter erector launchers across this area for 40 years. In just a few minutes, a TEL can drive to a pre-surveyed firing location, conceal itself inside a tunnel launch, and move. The ones we could discover were deleted. Whether we found them all is the question. Think about the capabilities of a single surviving launcher. In terminal phase, a Enor cruise missile accelerates beyond the speed of sound while flying 5 to 7 feet above the waterline. At a speed greater than Mach 3, a Khalij Fars ballistic missile descends from above the atmosphere. Flight time is reduced to seconds from the Iranian shore to the shipping waterway. A supertanker has 1,100 feet of undefended steel, no chaff, no EEGs, and no defensive systems. One strike, one rocket. The world's smallest shipping channel is consuming 2 million barrels of crude oil. We got rid of 90%. However, Escort relies on assurance rather than percentages. The launchers that we were unable to locate are included in the 10% that we did not destroy, moved at night hidden in the mountains. One missile and one surviving launcher. The equation only requires that. No clear route, no assurance of safety. Layer 2 is that. The ceiling, or what's left of it, is owned by missiles. However, the trap has an additional dimension. The Iranian surface fleet has been rendered inoperable. The 2 Mujj-class frigates have vanished. Sabalan, the Alvin class, is no more. The forward base ship of Makran is unusable. Shahid Bagheri, the drone carrier, was hit and is thought to have sunk. More than 50 ships were destroyed. The traditional Navy is no longer a cohesive fighting force. However, the IRGC Navy was never a traditional Navy. The rapid assault craft has always been its primary capability. Hundreds of fishing bays and island coves throughout the strait are home to small boats under 50 feet in length, capable of 50 knots, and equipped with torpedoes and short-range missiles. These boats are almost impossible to completely eradicate from standoff range and are hard to spot from the air. It is estimated by analysts that the IRGC keeps most of its fleet of small boats. 80 to 90% of vessels were never intended for carrier-based aircraft to locate. They are too numerous, too little, and too scattered. More than 20 Ghadir-class miniature submarines equipped with torpedoes and capable of laying more mines were hidden behind the swift boats. These submarines were small enough to conceal themselves in shallow coastal waters and quiet enough to avoid passive sonar. One was destroyed by us. Before the first strikes landed, the remainder scattered into bays and coves along the strait. Additionally, since the strait closed, explosive unmanned surface vessels and kamikaze drone boats have attacked at least 2 tankers. They don't have to live. They must come. There is less of a swarm. It's still there. Furthermore, no escort commander can ignore the threat posed by even a weakened swarm in a 6 nautical mile corridor. Put what's left in a stack. It will take months for the mines below to be cleared. Above launchers, it is impossible to certify at 0. On the sides are drones and remaining swift boats. Most, but not all, of the trap is deteriorated. 90% was destroyed by us. The remaining 10% is plenty to make Escort a wager that no engineer would accept. I can hear the objection now. We have nearly 3,000 targets, hit thousands of sorties, flown 2 carrier strike groups in the theater and a 3rd on the way. Why not simply complete the task and let the tankers to pass through? Because further bombs have no effect on the 3 outstanding issues. The seafloor already has the mines. You can't bomb them. It takes months to sweep them with ships that aren't in the theater. No commander can ensure that no TELs survived, since the mobile launchers conceal in mountain territory that has been protected for decades. Furthermore, making a mistake has disastrous consequences. A single mine under an Arleigh Burke results in $2 billion in destruction, and a war whose reach has just expanded. 2 million barrels of crude oil would burn in the most important shipping channel in the world if a missile were to strike a tanker. The anticipated benefit of success is outweighed by the anticipated cost of failure. An engineer wouldn't place that wager. What is the plan then? This is where the geometry changes, and most commentary overlooks this realization. We don't have to go into Hormuz. We didn't. Take another look at the map. The 3rd Carrier Strike Group, USS Abraham Lincoln, is positioned east of the strait in the Gulf of Oman. It is not necessary for the Lincoln to push through the choke point. Its air wing commands the eastern approach from where it is now. Nothing passes through the Lincoln's strike and surveillance envelope before entering or leaving the Persian Gulf. Now think about the implications for Iran. Iranian exports were blocked by the same mines that prevented tankers from passing across the strait. Every day, Iran exports over 1.4 million barrels of oil, almost all of which must travel through Hormuz in order to be paid for. Both sides of the strait are sealed. Due to mines and the ongoing threat of missiles, commercial tankers are not allowed to enter. Carrier attack groups and total air superiority prevent Iranian tankers from leaving. To keep us out, Iran constructed a trap. The trap was successful. However, the trap is not one way. Iranian trade is hindered by the same geometry mines and missiles that prohibit American escort. Inside its own stronghold, Iran is choking. Revenue is decreasing. Fuel supplies are limited. The capacity to maintain military operations without revenue from exports expressed in weeks rather than months. It is not necessary for the bearers to go into the hallway. The carriers wait at the door. We have time on our side. Iran suffers economically every day the strait remains closed, while our carrier strike groups cycle new supplies from 2 ocean supply lines. We have worldwide supply networks and the durability of nuclear propulsion. Iran's economy can withstand sanctions because it has closed its sole export route on its own will. It's not a deadlock, it's a siege. And the party under assault shut itself within. Subscribe to Drone Frontline and forward this to someone who values the Navy if this breakdown has altered your perception of the Navy and you now see math on a map rather than borders. So why won't the world's strongest Navy accompany tankers over a 21 nautical mile strait? Hormuz is not a strength test. It's a math test. Additionally, every engineer in this audience is well aware that you don't solve an equation by bumping into a wall head-on. You circumvent it. Iran built a trap at the front door for 40 years. We gave it everything we had, and 90% of it was destroyed. Additionally, since 10% is not a rounding error in a 6 nautical mile hallway, the remaining 10% is still sufficient to close the corridor. 10% is a mega-tanker on fire. Here's what Iran misjudged, though. A navy that had to cross the strait was the target of the trap. We don't. We demonstrated how carrier strike groups stationed at Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and Suez formed a geometric siege around the Islamic Republic in our earlier analysis. You now comprehend the last component of that geometry. Lincoln is positioned east of Hormuz because it does not need to enter, not because it cannot. Iran is unable to transport a single barrel of oil through the door, which is secured from the outside and sealed with its own mines. At the entrance door, Iran set up a $1,500 trap. The front door was not opened by us. From the outside, we locked it. The trapper is now imprisoned by the trap. That isn't firepower. Geometry is that. That's patience. That's engineering. Operation Epic Fury. We destroyed more than 50 Iranian warships. We removed their coastal radar chains. We brought down their air defense network from both oceans at once. 2 carrier strike groups controlled 2 chokepoints around the Islamic Republic Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. A third is currently crossing the Atlantic. The tightest naval siege since World War II, and it is continually tightening. However, there is one thing the U.S. Navy has not done. We have not escorted any oil tankers across the Strait of Hormuz. Sit with that for a moment. The most powerful navy in human history. 11 carrier strike groups, 300 ships, the EEG combat system, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and 5th-generation stealth fighters. We will not send a convoy through a canal 21 nautical miles wide. More than 100 supertankers are currently stranded outside the strait. Engines are cold, and crews are waiting. Brent crude has risen from $70 per barrel to more over $100. War risk insurance premiums average $250,000 each transit. The world economy is collapsing, and the Navy that recently decimated the Iranian military is sitting in open water watching. Why not? Because we lack firepower. Not because we lack willpower. Because the Strait of Hormuz isn't a strength test. It's a math test. And the mathematics are pretty clear: do not enter. Subscribe to Drone Frontline, because those who serve deserve an audience that understands their mission. Type "proud" in the comments. To grasp the math, you must first understand the map and the trap embedded within it. Unfold the map. Look at the Strait of Hormuz, which is 21 nautical miles at its narrowest point. That sounds vast. It isn't. Because commercial shipping does not require 21 nautical miles. Commercial shipping employs the traffic separation strategy. 2 designated lanes, each 2 nautical miles wide and separated by a 2 nautical mile buffer zone. Overall, there are 6 nautical miles of viable route. Now, place a ship in that corridor. A supertanker is an extremely large petroleum ship that measures over 1,100 feet from bow to stern. Beam measures 200 feet, draft 72 feet below the waterline. You are not sailing a ship over an ocean. You're threading a building through a corridor. There are walls on both sides of the passageway. One of them belongs to Iran. This hallway carries 20% of the world's crude oil, 20 million barrels per day. It also transports roughly 20% of worldwide liquefied natural gas and 1/3 of global fertilizer traffic. Blocking this hallway does more than only disrupt the oil market. You interrupt the supply channels that keep society functioning. Hormuz is not an oil choke point. Hormuz is a civilizational choke point. Right now, it is closed. Over 100 tankers are anchored outside the channel. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps declared the closure and warned to engage any vessel that attempted to transit. Brent crude has risen above $100 per barrel. War risk insurance rates have risen to $250,000 each journey. The costs are so high that most shipping businesses have simply ceased trying. The strait is not obstructed by a chain crossing the water. Math prevents it. The math of risk outperforms the math of profit. Commerce halts itself. So the obvious question is, should we simply destroy the Iranian Navy? We have EEG destroyers, carrier air wings, and Tomahawk missiles. Why not simply guide the tankers through? Because the folks who asked the question did not thoroughly research the map or the enemy. Here's what most analysts overlook. Iran did not construct its defense mindlessly. For 40 years, they investigated every American Navy operation in these areas. Operation Earnest Will, 1987, Operation Praying Mantis, 1988, decades of Fifth Fleet presence in Bahrain, and Operation Prosperity Guardian last year. They observed, learnt, and reverse-engineered a layered defense particularly tailored to exploit the one thing we cannot change: the shape of this strait. The passageway is tiny, the water is limited, and Iran used every limitation of its topography as a weapon. The trap has 3 levels. Each one exploits a different dimension, and when they combine, they produce a challenge that no amount of sheer force can solve. Most of the architecture has been devastated by persistent air and naval strikes over the course of 10 days. More than 50 Iranian warships have been destroyed or rendered combat ineffective. Approximately 300 missile launchers have been removed, and 200 air defense systems have gone dark. The surface fleet no longer functions as a unified fighting force, and yet the strait remains blocked. The question isn't how much we destroyed, but how much survived. And in escort mathematics, where one weapon striking one tanker wipes out all previous successes, the answer is brutal. 90% destruction is not sufficient. Escort demands absolute confidence, and the gap between 90 and 100 is where this equation fails. Look at what's left. This is the layer that air power cannot repair because the damage has already occurred. Iran began laying mines before the first bombs landed. According to US intelligence, several have already entered the ocean. Contact mines, moored mines, and bottom influence mines are spread across the maritime lanes. Iran has an estimated inventory of 2,000 to 6,000 weapons. We destroyed 16 mine-laying vessels and targeted storage facilities. This slowed the number of new mines entering the sea. It did not eliminate the existing mines. You can't bomb a mine out of the ocean. You must locate it in murky, current-driven water along 360 square nautical miles of seafloor, label it, and neutralize it one at a time. The Avenger-class mine countermeasures fleet has been nearly completely deactivated. 4 ships remain. 4 have been deployed in Japan, 4,000 nautical miles distant. Experts believe that clearing the strait will take several months. Remember the mathematics from 1988. During Operation Earnest Will, the USS Samuel B. Roberts struck one Iranian contact mine. The mine costs $1,500. It blew a hole the size of a car through the hull, shattered the keel, and filled 2 compartments with 2,000 long tons of seawater. The repair cost is $89.5 million. A weapon costing less than a used motorcycle almost sank a fleet. Imagine that mine beneath a supertanker transporting 2 million barrels of crude oil. The mathematics gets worse. Mines retain the floor, which cannot be cleared with firepower alone. That's layer 1. Now glance up. We eliminated over 90% of Iran's missile launch capacity. 300 launchers were deleted. That is an outstanding accomplishment. The type of suppression effort that would bring an end to most traditional hostilities. However, the conflict in Hormuz is not traditional. It's a corridor. And in a hallway, 1 surviving launcher is sufficient. The Zagros mountain range, which drops into the sea, forms Iran's shoreline along the strait. Ridgelines, valleys, caverns, and tunnels. For 40 years, the IRGC stationed mobile transporter erector launchers across this landscape. A TEL may conceal itself inside a tunnel drive to a pre-surveyed firing location launch, and then move in minutes. We eliminated those we could discover. The question is whether we have located them all. Consider what 1 surviving launcher can accomplish. In terminal phase, a NOR cruise missile flies 5 to 7 feet over the waterline and accelerates faster than sound. A Khalij Fares ballistic missile drops from above the stratosphere at speeds greater than Mach 3. From the Iranian coast to the shipping lane, flight time is reduced to seconds. A supertanker has no defensive systems, no chaff, no EEGs, and 1,100 feet of unprotected steel. 1 missile resulted in 1 hit. 2 million barrels of crude oil are burning in the world's narrowest shipping lane. We eliminated 90%. However, escorts rely on certainty rather than percentages. The 10% we did not destroy comprises the launchers we were unable to locate, hidden in the highlands and moved at night. 1 surviving launcher and 1 missile. That is all the equation requires. There is no guarantee of safety and no defined path. That's layer 2. Missiles own the ceiling, or what's left of it. However, the trap has 1 additional dimension. The Iranian surface navy is essentially annihilated. Both Mudge-class frigates are gone. Sabalan of the Alvin class is no longer present. The Makran forward base ship is malfunctioning. The drone carrier Shahid Bagheri was hit and is thought to have sunk. Over 50 vessels were deleted. The traditional navy is no longer an organized fighting force. However, the IRGC Navy was never a normal navy. Its primary capacity was always a rapid attack craft. Small boats under 50 feet long, capable of 50 knots, and armed with short-range missiles and torpedoes, are launched from the strait's hundreds of fishing bays and island coves. These boats are difficult to identify from the air and nearly impossible to eliminate completely from a standoff distance. Analysts believe the IRGC retains the majority of its small boat fleet. 80 to 90% of vessels were never intended to be located by carrier-based aircraft. They are too little spread and many. Behind the fast boats are about 20 Gadir-class midget submarines, small enough to conceal in shallow coastal waters, quiet enough to avoid passive sonar loaded with torpedoes, and capable of laying further mines. We destroyed one. Before the first hits, the rest had dispersed into coves and bays along the strait. Along with them are explosive unmanned surface watercraft known as kamikaze drone boats, which have already damaged at least 2 tankers since the strait was closed. They do not have to survive. They need to arrive. The swarm has reduced. It's not gone. And in a 6 nautical mile sector, even a small swarm offers a hazard that no escort commander can dismiss. Stack whatever remains. Mines below are months from being cleaned. Surviving launchers above are impossible to certify from zero, remaining swift boats and drones on the flanks. The trap is deteriorated, but not completely. We destroyed 90%. The remaining 10% is sufficient to make Escort a bet that no engineer would risk. Now I can hear the objections. We currently have 2 carrier strike groups in theater, with a third on its way, thousands of sorties flown, and over 3,000 targets hit. Why not just finish the job and guide the tanks through? Because the 3 remaining problems do not respond to further bombs. The mines are already on the seafloor. You can't blast them out. You must sweep them with ships we do not have in theater, which is a months-long procedure. The mobile launchers are concealed in mountain territory that has been fortified for decades, and no commander can ensure that no TELS survived. And the consequences of being wrong are disastrous. One mine under an Arleigh Burke equals $2 billion in destruction and a battle that has just doubled in size. A single missile hit a tanker igniting 2 million barrels of crude oil in the world's most crucial shipping lane. The predicted cost of failure exceeds the expected return from succeeding. That is not a bet an engineer would accept. So what's the strategy? Here is where the geometry changes, and this is the understanding that most commentary overlooks. We don't need to enter Hormuz. We never did. Look at the map again. USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group 3 is stationed in the Gulf of Oman east of the strait. The Lincoln doesn't have to push past the choke point. From its current position, its air wing commands the eastern approach. Nothing enters or leaves the Persian Gulf without passing through the Lincoln monitoring and strike envelope. Now contemplate what this means for Iran. The mines that closed the strait to tankers also prevented Iranian shipments. Iran exports over 1.4 million barrels of oil per day, with nearly all of it passing through Hormuz to reach any paying consumer. The strait is sealed on both sides. Commercial tankers will not enter because to mines and the residual missile threat. Iranian tankers are unable to leave due to carrier strike groups and total air supremacy. Iran set a trap to keep us out. The trap worked. However, the trap is not one-directional. The same mines, missiles, and geometry that prohibits American escort also impede Iranian traffic. Iran is suffocating within its own stronghold. Revenue is plummeting. Fuel reserves are finite. The ability to sustain military operations without export income measured in weeks rather than months. The bearers do not have to enter the passageway. The carriers sit at the door waiting. Time is on our side. Every day the strait is closed. Iran suffers economically, while our carrier strike groups rotate fresh supplies from logistics lines across 2 seas. We have the durability of nuclear propulsion and worldwide supply networks. Iran has the resilience of a sanctioned economy, with its sole export channel locked shut by its own hand. That is not a stalemate. That's a siege. and the besieged party barricaded itself inside. If this breakdown has transformed your perception of the Navy, if you now look at a map and see math rather than boundaries, subscribe to Drone Frontline and share it with someone who values the service. So why does the world's most powerful Navy refuse to accompany tankers over a 21 nautical mile strait? Because Hormuz isn't a strength test. It's a math test. And every engineer in this audience is well aware that you do not solve an equation by running headfirst into a wall. You stroll around it. Iran spent 40 years creating a trap at the front door. We struck it with everything we had, destroying 90%. The remaining 10% is sufficient to close the corridor, because 10% is not a rounding mistake in a 6 nautical mile hallway. 10% represents a burning supertanker. But here's what Iran got wrong. The trap was intended for a Navy vessel that needed to enter the channel. We don't. In our previous breakdown, we shown how carrier strike groups stationed at Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and Suez formed a geometric siege around the Islamic Republic. You now comprehend the final piece of the geometry. Lincoln maintains its position east of Hormuz, not because it cannot enter, but because it does not have to. The door is barred from the outside, and Iran cannot ship a single barrel of oil through the door, which it has sealed shut with its own mines. Iran set a $1,500 trap at the entrance door. We didn't open the front door. We locked it from outside, and now the trap has imprisoned the trapper. That isn't firepower. That's geometry. That is patience. That's engineering.